try to project yourself down the line 10 or 20 years and be like, if I'm still doing this, then am I going to be certain? What is that going to be like?
Right. And I think the crazy thing is that, like we were talking about yesterday with the hamster wheel, the solution is not to work harder.
Mm-hmm.
Hey everybody, and welcome to Epic Everyday. I'm Liz Frerichs, and this is my husband Evan.
Greetings.
And we are so glad that you are with us on this lovely, fine Tuesday.
Yes. Hope your week's going well.
Yeah. And we are still on Living on the Verge. As you guys know, we work our way through the CSCs, which are a adaptation of Peter Ralston's Tai Chi principles. In case you don't remember.
They are calm, surrendered, connected, complete. Wait a minute.
You forgot one.
Centered, and complete.
Centered comes before connected.
All right. There's 5 in there somewhere. And
yes.
Today we're going to be talking about surrender and the verge.
Yes. So, living on the verge. When I think of living on the verge, one of the things that really struck me when I was thinking about that versus surrender is just that feeling so out of control.
That's almost the opposite of what I thought of, but go ahead.
Interesting. Yeah, when I think of being on the verge, it's because I feel out of control. And so I am frantically trying to control as many things as I can, which then means that I'm juggling like 500 different balls, and I run from the moment when I wake up until the moment that I go to bed.
I guess that's what I put. But I put it in like there's so much responsibility on your shoulders, which is kind of what you were saying. And so, you were saying the motivation is out of control. So I'm going to ratchet up the control. Yeah.
Right.
But that's what it is. Yeah. And I think this, especially for Americans, we're so proud of our pull yourself up by your bootstraps, be a self-made person.
Yeah.
And it's all on you.
Yeah.
And so why would you ever surrender? I mean, that's weakness. Don't do that. Just keep working.
Yeah, that if you just work hard enough, if you just, man, my shoulders are getting tight thinking about it.
Shake it off.
Just that, that fear that everything will fall apart if you stop for just a second,
Yeah. So to double that down, so maybe this is what you're. Well, I thought that motivation comes from being filled with self-doubt. Like, I'm going to work so hard that my self-doubt kind of starves and dies, if I work hard.
Like proving how awesome you are?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, proving, or that I'm just competent. I mean, that's something I struggle with. If I'm not competent, my self-worth goes way down, If I get confronted with a problem that I can't solve automatically, or I try to look something up and research it and it still doesn't make any sense,
Yeah, I was just thinking about that because I watched Josh. Oh, I just lost his last name. The guy that wrote the 20-hour rule.
Is that the name of the book?
I believe that's the name of the book. But so he talks about how it takes 20 hours. He's got a YouTube TED Talk on it. But how it really takes 20 hours to learn something versus the 10,000-hour rule. Like the 10,000-hour rule is if you want to be top of your field
world champion at it.
Right, and they studied athletes and musicians. If you want to be, top of your field for being an athlete or a musician, look at putting in 10,000 hours. But if you just want to be competent at something, it takes about 20 hours.
Interesting.
But he was talking about how we all hate learning new things, because we feel stupid.
Yeah.
And so when we start, whenever you start something new, if it's within the first, I forget how long he said it was, but the first certain number of hours, you just feel dumb. And it's not fun. Yeah. And you have to push through that.
Right. And, some people maybe are more immune to that than others. But yeah, I think that's totally true. Nobody wants to feel dumb.
Right. So, yeah, I definitely think that feeling out of control, feeling not competent, that causes us to push ourselves. One of the things that really struck me when I was thinking about it is I don't want to be that person, especially not Like, I don't want to be still feeling out of control, still in survival mode. I think it's so easy for us to kind of have that mirage-like effect. Like we were talking about yesterday with the I'll rest when we get to this point. Like, things will be good enough when they get to XYZ. And it's always a mirage. Like, it's always, you get to XYZ and suddenly there's this other thing, you know? And so this idea that I'll wait until I'm at XYZ before I become someone who is calm and who is surrendered, that's really scary to me.
Yeah. I think you can picture, at least I know I can think of a couple people that would fall in either category. My grandfather was able, I think, to do surrender and calm. Like, he was busy and productive, but he was never in a rush, you know.
Yeah.
And that's the kind
That
of
is
the
one of
goal,
the things that I love about
you know.
him.
But then I also know people that they're just rushing everywhere and they're so busy. And yeah, so try to project yourself down the line 10 or 20 years and be like, if I'm still doing this, then am I gonna be certain? What is that gonna be like?
Right. And I think the crazy thing is that, like we were talking about yesterday with the hamster wheel, the solution is not to work harder. The solution, you know, has nothing to do with keep doing what you're doing. If you keep doing what you're doing,
Yeah.
you'll always get the same results you got.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. It's not like, if we're thinking my grandfather, you know, by the time I knew him, he was already, I don't know, 60 or something. You know, it's not like up until that point was the like crazy run pedal to the metal guy, never sleep, and then all of a sudden he got there and was able to relax. You know,
Right.
it's a skill that
Oh
you
yeah,
have to
that is
learn.
something, man, that is something that I hear all the time. I don't know if it's just where we're at in our lives, but there are a lot of people I know who are like, I'm going to wait till I retire.
Oh
Like,
yeah.
once I retire, then I will slow down. And yeah, it never slows down. So
Yeah, you know, if you check in with those people after they retired, I would imagine it didn't work.
right.
I mean, you can retire and just still be, you know, being just as busy and just as frantically doing something else.
Right. So, the solution, rather than running faster on our hamster wheels, is surrender. It's being able to stop and say, wait a minute. I don't want to be in rush on the verge of collapse, on the verge of freak out. You know, letting God decide where you're supposed to be.
And I think it's to realize that when you're in that first mode, you're surrendered to that process. And now we need to decide to surrender to another process. Like,
Right.
you
Either
can't
way, you're
avoid,
surrendered to something.
That's right. And so use this podcast as a excuse to try something different, or, you know, get into the scriptures, or you know, whatever. There's lots of ways to learn about this.
Right. Yeah. I was actually thinking about Job 42:2, where Job says, I know that you can do all things. No plan of yours can be thwarted. And I was just thinking about how when it's our plans, at least for me, my plans go awry all the time.
Yeah.
You know, because I don't know all the factors in them. And so often I'm like, okay, here's my plan for the day. And then something happens and all of a sudden my plan is totally derailed and then I'm super stressed, versus God's plans where he's like, I am doing my plan and nobody can stop my plan.
Right. Yeah, that's the Verge mentality, isn't it? Like, oh, I had a phone call I wasn't expecting, and now my day's in shambles. You know, I mean,
Yes. I've totally said that before.
Yeah, and we've been there, and some days we're still there.
Yeah.
This is a process.
Oh, that's why we're doing the podcast.
That's
Remind
right.
ourselves that we need it.
It's yep, that's true.
Yeah, I was thinking about how God's plan is like, I think I'm going to come back to this a lot, but it's like that current in if you've seen Finding Nemo or Finding Dory, the ocean current. Yes, the turtle current.
Isn't that what it's called?
No, it's
the Great Pacific Turtle Current.
I don't remember. I actually had it written down at one point, but it was like the transatlantic, whatever. but
Oh,
or the California current. There
yeah.
were a couple
Sure.
different currents that they showed, but just how it was so cool, both cinematically and just conceptually. This idea that when they jumped into the current, they were rushing on ahead. And I feel like so often, that's God's plan for us. Like when we align with what his plans are for us, we actually get more done.
Oh, yeah.
It's so much easier. I mean, that's one of the things I think of with surrender. Like, it is when you're doing it on your own, it's exhausting.
Mm-hmm.
It's just, yeah, you don't have time to breathe, you don't have time to think. It's very stressful.
Yeah, very much. I know one of the main ways I was able to start to learn this for, I guess, a new time. I don't know. It always seems like it's the first time if it's a big enough epiphany or whatever. But when we had our first child, and I I was freaking out a little bit, and I knew I needed to get some help about some certain things, and so I joined a support group, and so surrender was one of the main things, and so
Mm-hmm.
that seems like the worst time to go away from the family for a couple hours a week, right?
Yeah.
Because I'm supposed to be home with you and the baby, but we decided that it was the right thing to do, and I am so thankful. And it's counterintuitive. Why am I going to go away and try to learn how to surrender
Yeah.
when I'm not with you,
Right. Yeah.
But it's enriched my life and our life together, and just really changed everything. So there's different points in that where, if you really, it was that Verge mentality. Like that Verge is going to bring about a crisis, either now or later, and that can be an
Right.
opportunity to get in touch with what God would have you do, and it's going to seem counterintuitive.
Right. Yeah. The Verge is definitely an opportunity to be like, wait a minute. I'm not I'm not in the current. I'm not surrendered. I'm
Mm-hmm.
in fall apart mode.
Yeah,
Something is wrong,
yeah.
you know? Versus being like, no, I'm just going to keep on. If I just push hard enough, if I pull on my bootstraps hard enough.
That image is so funny to me. I always just picture a cartoon cowboy kind of suspended in the air in like a pretzel because he's got his hands on his bootstraps, but I guess that's what it is, isn't it? You
Mm-hmm.
can't really do it.
Yeah. Well, unless you're, oh, come on. I totally lost
Cartoon
his
cowboy.
name. No,
Oh,
the character that was originally from.
oh, was it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Anyway. And one of the other things that I really, really love about surrender and God's plan, not only is it faster and takes less energy, jumping into that current, but I always keep coming back to Romans 8:28, where it talks about how God works everything for the good of those who love Him.
Mm-hmm.
Like when we surrender our day to the Lord, it kind of gives Him room
Oh, sure.
to micromanage our days around.
And he's waiting to do that.
Right. I love Beth Moore talks about how God has a treasure for us, multiple treasures for us every single day. Every single day, He has things that He wants to give us. And when we're so tightly hanging on to the day, there's no room for God to, move things around and to give us those treasures. So every day that we are clinging on to that,
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it on my own. I'm going to, push through. I'm going to work harder. We're missing out on something.
Yeah. I think as Christians, that's too easy to do. We're like so focused on the mechanics of the cross and how our salvation is possible that we miss the daily
Right.
stuff. And even in the scripture, there's some, we don't have a lot of information about Jesus's daily life from, his birth to when he started his ministry, but we still get to see when he was an adult how he interacted with people.
Right.
And then all the other stories in the Bible too. But, you know, yeah, you're right. God is, that's the Sermon on the Mount. I mean, the kingdom is coming and it's here now. Jesus
Right.
is here now, and it's a totally different way of life.
Definitely. And a way better one.
Mm-hmm.
So if you've never tried it, this is an opportunity to do something different today. To stop, take a breath, and then give it to the Lord.
Yeah, see it as a challenge. I mean,
It is a
something.
challenge.
Well, yeah. I guess I'm trying to think of how you make it trigger in your mind that like, oh, I should try some surrender now. So I don't know, associate the pain with, oh, now it's time for me to try that thing I heard about.
Right, right. And you can start your day out with surrender. One of the things that has really changed my life is just starting my day kneeling down and saying, Lord, today is yours. Help me to be open to that. Help me to let you, give you the freedom to change what you want to change. Not that God isn't going to change what he's going to change anyway, like the verse we just talked about in Job where it says, no one's going to thwart his plans. But I think if we're in a place where we can receive, we get so many other things. So, and I want that. I don't want to miss out on whatever treasures God has for me today.
Yeah. I totally agree.
All right.
We'd love to hear what you think. Does that make sense to you? Do you agree?
Yeah. And have you used surrender and has it changed things? I mean, that's the great thing about the CSCs. They can change your life if you apply them, but they can change your moment.
Yeah.
Like, that's one of the things that I love.
That's right.
You can be in overwhelm one moment, apply the CSCs, and in the next moment have a totally different perspective and a totally different outcome because of your different perspective.
And then the next moment, you could be back on the verge, but then you can come back. It's the moment that we're in is really where God is meeting us.
Right.
So there's a couple of different ways you can get a hold of us because we would love to hear what you think. Join our Facebook group. It's Epic Everyday Facebook group for the show. And we're also on Twitter, Liz and I. Liz's handle is Frerichs.
And Evan's is at A Kind of Lying. And doesn't the show have one?
Yeah, but I don't remember what it is. So I'll have that ready.
All right. So give us any feedback if you guys have any suggestions of topics for us to talk about. We'd love to talk about whatever. We have seen the CSCs applied to pretty much every area of life, I think. And it has transformed. Well,
we haven't been grandparents yet.
That's true. There are some things we haven't done yet, but every time we've applied the CSCs, it has drastically changed everything. Yeah. So any suggestions you guys have of things you would like us to talk about, I mean, that's why we're here. Everybody needs reminded every day to apply this stuff.
Yeah.
Especially us.
That's right. So until next time, enjoy the rest of your week. We'll talk to you again tomorrow.
All right. Have a great day.
See ya.